Hey guys, this is Krista from the Moratorium. Do you like grisly gore and mysteries? Of course you do. That is why I suggest you subscribe to my blog, Suspended Animation, Dormant Stories Waiting to be Told, where we at the Moratorium offer a number of lurid tales from axemen running around New Orleans to phantoms in Texarkana. And if you're feeling especially generous, head over to our Patreon, where for just a couple bucks a month, you can help the Moratorium grow. And that would be pretty kick-ass. And remember, long live VHS.
It's been a long, dreary road through Salem, and we finally made it to the end. Welcome to the Moratorium. I'm Tim Kornman, and I'm joined and maybe conjoined this week with my good friend and history buff, Krista Funk, to bring you part 3 of the Salem Witch Trials. This is the second half to last week's episode, which may explain the sudden jump into the middle of the conversation. Cue the music.
And in 3, 2, 1, I already forgot it.
You will be soon to speak as a giant, or like all the others, dead.
You think I imagined all of it, don't you? You think I'm insane?
That's feng shui.
A match made in a bathroom, just floating into the void.
The first person to get executed was Bridget Bishop.
And we haven't even mentioned Bridget Bishop. We got all these other girls.
So Bridget Bishop...
How was Tituba not the first one sentenced to hang?
Tituba did not hang. Tituba sat in prison the whole time.
And she was the first.
Well, but Tituba did something that these other people did not. She confessed.
Okay, so confessing would...
We mentioned this in the last episode. Not always would a confession, save you. But during the Salem Witch Trials, that was true. If you confessed, that's put you in the hands of God, and it was up to God to decide if you were going to go to heaven or hell.
All right.
Tituba she presented herself as a victim, like I was attacked, relentlessly.
Okay. It wasn't because I was possessed as well?
No, she eventually said, okay, I had, they finally got me. I had to sign the book. And then I had to go and do these horrible things to these girls. And that's one reason why people readily, took these girls seriously, because you have this person, this adult, saying that they're true and that she did these things, But Tituba told them this because she also knew this was the only explanation they were going to accept. Right. She couldn't say, no, I didn't do it, because she tried that. And they were like, no, you did. And she was like, oh, well, okay, I guess I did.
My bad. Sorry. The truth escapes me. I sent two-headed beasts over to Ann Putnam's house. Sure. That's right. Yep.
She was telling them whatever they wanted to hear. But this is where she was savvy, because she was like, oh, well, by the way, there were all these other names in the book, which freaked everybody out. Like I said, that's where the hysteria began, because they were like, wait a minute, in our hallowed community, now there's a bunch of other witches. She said she saw multiple names. Who are they, and what are their intentions? This is going to get worse. Yes, things got worse, but not because of witchcraft. You could argue that Satan was at work in Salem, but not in the manner in which the Puritans thought he was. And
okay. Satan always gets the bad rap, He was just trying to plant corn as well. Hey, leave me out of this, guys. I'm cool.
The first person to be sentenced to death, to be condemned by the court of Oyer and Terminer, was Bridget Bishop. And we do have record of her trial because of John Corwin and Hawthorne. Oh, and Cotton Mather, he also talked about her trial. She was kind of a pariah, too. She had been married several times. She was very independent. She was outspoken. All these things that the men in Salem don't like. But she was also attractive. Okay. And she owned a tavern. Ooh. And she liked to party. She liked to drink. She liked to stay up late. Yeah. And, of course, she was accused of being a harlot and, all sorts of stuff,
She sounds cool.
She got into some trouble. Actually, right before she was arrested, she got into some trouble with the church in Salem Village because she had a party.
Right on.
Or at least she had enough people having enough fun to be considered a party.
Hey, all you need is 3.
She committed the cardinal sin of people drinking and playing shovelboard at her house.
Ooh, awesome.
I don't know how you're going to get over it, but...
That's the greatest party game I've heard. You know, greatest drinking game is shuffleboard.
Shuffleboard is so fun. So fun. But yeah, just right before her arrest, she actually got into some trouble with the people of Salem Village because she had had some people over. They were over very late, like pretty much all night. They spent the whole night drinking. They were having fun and they were playing shuffleboard. Oh my God, the horror. And so she got into some trouble over that. And of course, she's over there like, really?
Right.
You obviously have nothing better to do.
You're mad because I didn't invite you.
Yeah, you're mad because I didn't invite you. You know, you want to come over and play shuffleboard?
Yeah, you want some mead?
You know, she's pretty much looking at the town of Salem like, eat me. I don't, you know, I'm going to do what I want to do.
My life rocks.
The biggest strike against Bridget Bishop, though, was, she'd been accused of witchcraft before.
No, damn it.
Yes.
You can't shake that title. We've already talked about this.
We have talked about this. And it was Samuel Sewell, I believe, that said, yeah, there wasn't a crime that was harder to wipe off than an accusation of witchcraft. And Bridget Bishop had one of those following her around, you know? So, of course, she was a social pariah.
That's right.
And she hung out with other social pariahs. And she drank and she partied and she had fun. And that's what she did. And she got into trouble. Abigail Williams and 4 other girls, including Ann Putnam Jr., claimed that she'd afflicted them with terrible visions, doing all the pinching, the biting, the slapping, the devil's book, the beast, you know.
I'm telling you, all these girls need to be slapped around.
I mean, they do, truly.
Not against child violence or, child abuse.
But in this case, we're going to make an exception.
Yes. Go get me a switch.
We know about the absurdity of Bishop's trial because, Cottonmouth wrote about it in his book, Wonders of the Invisible World.
Ooh.
And in it, he talked about Bridget Bishop's trial and how during the trial, these girls are in there saying all sorts of shit. And Bridget Bishop would look at them, and every time she did, all of them together would just,
of course.
They're in pain.
Your eye lasers are hurting.
Yeah,
you.
They're flying around all over the place. They're,
mind bullets.
Mind bullets. That's telekinesis, Kyle. How about the power to move you? But, these girls are, and she's over there like, I'm not doing anything to them. But the more that the accused would deny what was happening to the girls, the louder the girls would be. The more pain they were in.
Oh, yeah.
Ultimately, as you may have guessed, there were no evidence of witchcraft, okay? There was none whatsoever, unless...
What about the teats?
Well, and that's another thing. These women, the accused, were subject to these, examinations, Bishop included, where they were looking at their genitals. Got to see if you have that witch's teat.
Look up there. I see it.
But she was ultimately convicted because William Stolton did something that normally wasn't allowed in any other court cases in Puritan New England, and that was he allowed spectral evidence.
Okay.
We talked about spectral evidence.
And that's how those are the mind bullets that are scratching and hurting these kids. It had to be.
Without spectral evidence, the Salem Witch trials would not have been possible at all. I mean, they might have been possible, but you would have had to have acquitted everybody. And the biggest thing in this story would be the trials themselves, but nobody would have died.
Sorry.
Except for Sarah Osborne, who died in prison. And Sarah Good's infant, who also died. Sarah Good, like I said, she was pregnant. She gave birth while she was in prison, and her infant passed away.
This was the derelict, the homeless woman, her daughter, who was only 4 at the time. She was convicted as well.
More than likely, she confessed so she could be with her mom. They actually went to the blacksmith and made a special set of shackles to fit this child. They shackled a 4-year-old. Okay? I'm just going to say that again. They shackled a 4-year-old. So, there's that. But Bishop was convicted solely on spectral evidence. All of them were. Everybody who was convicted during the trials, everybody who died, it was all done on spectral evidence alone because there wasn't any actual evidence.
Right.
And spectral evidence wasn't supposed to be allowed. This was not something that, I mean, the Puritans, like I said, they get this bad rap for these trials. Spectral evidence was not something that was generally accepted in any of the other, trials that you find. And yes, you might find one here and there, but not normally. And Stoughton had allowed spectral evidence to be used. And of course, everybody on the panel accepted this except for one. There was one guy
hey guys,
who was like, you guys are like Harvard graduates. You guys know better. Okay. We don't use spectral evidence for a reason. He was like, listen, spectral evidence is not professional. This is not a viable, credible source. This is a he said, she said. This is not something that can be proven. Therefore, this shouldn't be allowed in a court case. There's a reason we don't use this, because you could very easily send an innocent person to the noose, and that is exactly what you're about to do. He believed that Bishop was innocent and that the spectral evidence was bullshit, and I'm not going to have this blood on my hands. He voted to save Bishop. The panel ruled against him. Well, you have to understand, the Court of Order Terminer is not accusing anybody of witchcraft. It's everybody else that's doing it. This dude that refused to convict Bishop, he left. He left the panel. He said, deuces, I'm out. He was like, I won't have anything to do with this trial. I won't have this blood on my hand. And you're going to send innocent people to the noose is what you're going to do. And so he left. Of course, they sent Bishop to the noose. She was hung June 10th, 1692. It was later in July when Rebecca Nurse was hung. She was hung with 4 other women, including Sarah Good. Sarah Good. So Sarah Good, when it's her turn, she's standing there. They're putting the noose around her neck. And there's a guy in the crowd. His name is Reverend Nicholas Noyes. Okay. And he believes that Sarah is a witch. He's shouting at her, and they're trying to, one last attempt to get her to, confess and yada yada. And she's like, I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. And if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink.
Those are famous last words right there.
This is what she says. And then they slipped the noose over her head and hung her. They are famous last words, considering that, 25 years later, Nicholas Noyes had a stroke or something. We probably had a stroke. And he is found dead one morning, apparently having choked in the middle of the night on his own blood.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. No, I don't think that this was witchcraft. I think it was an interesting coincidence.
Makes for a good story.
We dig it. It makes for a good story. You go, Sarah. But like I said, these accusations weren't just confined to Salem. They spread all over the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and including Plymouth. Like I said, they merged with the colony just in time to get in on the Salem witch trials. People from other parts of the colony outside of Salem are being hauled into Salem to be put on trial. One of these was Reverend George Burroughs.
No, not the Reverend.
The former pastor. By accusing George Burroughs, you can see that these girls are growing bolder.
I guess, yeah.
They're accusing a male, and they're accusing a minister on top of that. And ministers were, thought to be, they couldn't become witches. So they were kind of safe from that. But the girls accuse George Burroughs, and he's up in Maine, and indeed they went up to Maine and arrested him and hauled him back to Salem for trial. He had, I've never seen where George Burroughs lived in Maine or what his home or the property looked like, but apparently he had a lot of frogs, a lot of toads, hanging on his property. And this was seen as they were like his familiars or something.
Right.
He had all these toads.
I was just licking those earlier. Nothing to see here.
His name was seen in the tall man's book, the devil's book. He had been afflicting these girls with visions and all sorts of things. And there was Ann Putnam Jr., ever so vocal about how George Burroughs had afflicted her, and had done all these horrible things to her. George Burroughs, of course, like all the others, was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I did no such things. I've not even been here. I've literally been in Maine this whole time. Like, I left. What do you guys want from me? I don't know what else to do for you guys. Nevertheless, George Burroughs is also convicted and sentenced to die.
Wow.
Now, at his hanging, this is when I think Burroughs scared the shit out of everybody, is what I think he did. I don't think it was until his execution that people really started to question whether or not these girls were telling the truth. And the reason that is because George Burroughs, like Sarah Good, he's standing there, noose around his neck, and people are shouting at him and stuff like that. And he says the Lord's Prayer, recites it letter perfect from beginning to end. He doesn't skip a beat. And this is significant because witches were not thought to be able to do that. They were not thought to be able to even listen to the Word of God, let alone quote Scripture or the Lord's Prayer correctly.
Okay.
So here's where George Burroughs, he gets up there and Our Father who art in heaven, he goes through the whole thing, goes through the whole motions, and he doesn't even skip a beat, and he doesn't hesitate.
Okay.
And the whole, and the crowd is, to my understanding, silent. They're all like, what the fuck did...
No, he must have missed something. They hang him anyway? Is that what happened?
No, y'all hang him anyway.
Oh, son of a
They
bitch.
hung him anyway. But I really think that it was Burroughs' execution that really kind of started to make people in Salem go, yeah, but he said the Lord's Prayer. You heard that, right? You saw that, right? Like, witches aren't supposed to be able to do that, Sarah Osborne was asked to recite some scripture or something, and she messed up, and this was a sign that she was a witch.
Right.
Sarah Good, the same thing, and so on and so forth. But there's Burroughs, who doesn't even skip a beat.
They should have gone to church. If they would have just gone to church, they would have known these things, right?
So it's not until the fall, really, of 1692. Like, it's almost a year later when these things, started, when attitudes towards these girls really started to change.
Okay.
And it wasn't just Burroughs' execution. They just got bolder and bolder. They're pointing the finger left and right. Men, children, ministers, people who were not thought to be witches. But the biggest no-no was there was a rumor out there. It was either a rumor or they actually did come out and accused John Hale. John Hale was a reverend who was in Salem at the time. There were reverends all over the place.
I guess.
They accused his wife, and they accused William Phibbs' wife, the governor of Massachusetts, and they accused, I believe, Increase Mather's wife, Cotton Mather's mom. And of course, when that happened, they were like, no.
Okay.
No, these girls have gone way too far. So the trials actually ended when Phibbs dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer. They didn't immediately go to the jail and free all of those people. No. They were left in there for a while after that. But the trials themselves were largely over. They weren't over, but the use of spectral evidence was. Nobody else was sentenced to death or sent to the noose. No one else was pressed to death. Instead, the trials were going to be moved elsewhere, and they were going to continue, but without the use of spectral evidence. And when this happened, of course, they started, acquitting people, and eventually just called the whole thing off together. It still took a while to get everybody out of jail. Oh, I forgot to tell the story. We'll back up for a bit. There was a couple that lived, I can't remember what part of Massachusetts they were in. They weren't far from Salem.
Okay.
But they were in a different town. This guy's wife gets accused of witchcraft, and she gets arrested, and she's being held there in town. But there's plans to transport her to Salem for trial. And this guy is like, man, I know that if my wife goes to Salem, she's never coming back.
Right.
He has no faith that she will survive these trials. And granted, keep in mind, there were other people who went up for trial who confessed to these witchcrafts, to these accusations, and therefore they were thrown back in prison and weren't sent to the news, just adding more to the hysteria that maybe, all of this is true. But this guy was like, hell no, not my wife. So he ended up, with the help of a buddy, they ended up busting his wife out of prison. And they took off.
going down in a blaze of glory.
It's not any wonder that you hear stories about couples who just disappeared in the colony.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they took off before somebody could accuse them, before they could
Awesome.
accuse their wives or their sister or something of witchcraft, or they're like this couple. And
Did they get away?
Yeah, I assume so.
All right.
This guy's wife wasn't killed in the trials.
In all, how many were accused, though?
I don't know.
How many were in the prison?
I don't know.
Okay. Just a lot.
I would assume overrun, packed, but how many were actually in there, I couldn't tell you. I can tell you there were 20 total who were killed during the trials. 19 of them were hung. One, Giles Corey, was crushed to death. Sarah Good died in prison. Or Sarah Osborne, died in prison.
And do we count her? Well, she was a victim of this. Do they count her in that 20?
She might be among those 20. There's a memorial in Salem that's right next to the cemetery, actually, to the victims that were killed during the trials. And they look like stone steps, and each of them has their names on it, and it will say hanged, and the date that they were hung.
Cool. Did you get pictures of that while you were there?
I did. John Proctor was hung. He was another male who was accused and convicted of witchcraft. He and his wife were both accused. Elizabeth Proctor was accused as well. Elizabeth Proctor survived the witch trials because it was discovered during her trial, actually, that she was pregnant. And they would not hang her while she was pregnant.
Okay.
Sarah Good, had she not lost her baby, they would not have hung her either. She gave birth and then lost her baby. But if she had still been pregnant,
And after that, they're like, you know what? Yeah, she's good. We can do it now.
But Elizabeth Proctor, she was pregnant. She discovered she was pregnant.
Great.
And so therefore their plan was she would, give birth and then they'd hang her. But the trials were put to an end and she was eventually released. But they did hang her husband.
Oh, damn it.
If you ever watch The Crucible, Daniel Day-Lewis plays her husband.
I have not seen that movie.
It's actually really good. It's actually really, really good. Now, Arthur Miller, he wrote a play called The Crucible. That's, where this movie comes from. And Arthur Miller, he wasn't actually trying to be historically accurate. And he was honest about that. He just took a real time period, a real event, and wrote this play.
Gotcha.
But he wasn't really that far off either. There was really only a couple of things that he changed, honestly.
The names.
For one thing, he had John Proctor and Abigail Williams having an affair.
Okay.
Winona Ryder plays Abigail Williams.
Right.
This is not true. This didn't happen. And Abigail Williams was a child and she was not having an affair with John Proctor. John Proctor was actually no Daniel Day-Lewis either. He was actually an older dude at the time. He wasn't a young guy like Daniel Day-Lewis was in that movie. But the girls in that film are actually, they are excellent. I mean, they really are. They're excellent. And like I said, that bit at the beginning, I don't think that they were, with the chicken. That didn't happen either. Miller threw that in there for shock value.
Well, I watched the trailer of The Crucible since I hadn't watched the movie before. And I didn't for this. I watched other stuff. And I didn't because you told me it wasn't necessarily accurate. And that's why I didn't watch it.
It's actually a really good movie,
Okay.
Tim. It really is.
Yeah,
and like I said, I did say it was historically inaccurate, and it is, but not terribly.
In the trailer itself, the music in the trailer was that of Basic Instinct.
Was it really?
And I was like, oh my God. And they really played up Winona Ryder having this affair. And it looks messed up.
Yeah, back in the 90s, I would say a lot of movies like borrowed music from other
But
their
for
trailers.
Basic
Yeah,
Instinct, I was like, damn.
that happened a lot. I hope no one was using an ice pick, but that's what she had, right? An ice pick?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a minute since I've seen Basic Instinct, but I just see Sharon Stone in that chair,
Yep. Everybody else did too.
Everyone else did too. All right.
I didn't see a teat.
I saw that so much that therefore, I could have sworn like the whole movie is just Sharon Stone in this chair. It's just. But anyway, I don't know, where was I at?
We were talking about The Crucible, Arthur Miller.
Oh yeah,
it
The
was
Crucible.
a good movie.
Yeah, it is good.
I actually tried to listen to the play. It was an audio version of the play,
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. I couldn't listen to it.
Reading it is also not very interesting either. I have a copy of it, but the movie is actually all right. It's actually pretty good. Daniel Day-Lewis does a great job. Winona Ryder, I've always loved her. She does a great job. But the girls in that film do a great job. I've made Mike watch that movie. He watched it. He's seen it one time, and at first he's making fun of these girls, yada yada yada, and then later he's like, damn, I mean, they're really putting on a show, aren't they? Later, he sees John Hale, and he's like, man, this is the only guy who's making any sense. Like, it was just funny watching him watch that movie. But yeah, there is some historical inaccuracies. For example, Abigail Williams was not having an affair with John Proctor. That'd be gross.
That movie also stars Bruce Davidson, Jeffrey Jones is in that. We love Jeffrey Jones. Frances Conroy is in it. I love Frances. She's been in many seasons of American Horror Story. George Gaines is in that, who everybody should know from Police Academy. He was Commandant Lassard.
So what happened to the girls after the trials were over? And why? Why did they do this?
Yeah, why?
Because, you asked at the beginning, why did they do this? That's a matter of debate, and there are several theories.
Okay.
They generally believed that they were possessed. They genuinely believed that a witch was afflicting them, and therefore that's why they did this. I personally do not subscribe to that school of thought. I think that's a bunch of BS. The school of thought that I generally, seem to lean to is that they were having fun. They were having a good time.
Yeah, it's fun to watch people hang.
I think that's just it. Did they have to watch them hang or not?
They should.
Because I don't think the girls were taken to the hangings, but I don't know that either. Personally, I think it started out with fear.
Okay.
The same route Tituba did. Like, I want the attention off of me. I need to be a victim, and I need to put this on somebody else. So they pointed the finger at Tituba. Tituba needed to point it at somebody else. So she pointed it at Sarah Osborne and Sarah Good, but threw in a loop and was like, there's like 6 or 7 other names in there that I couldn't see. Mm-hmm. She knew good and well that they were all going to flip out, and she just sat back in prison and watched. Like I said, I think Tituba might have been the most clever of everybody in Salem. She survived the trials, by the way, and was sold back into slavery.
Well, she lived.
She did live.
It does say here on Wikipedia, I just happened upon this earlier, about Ann Putnam.
I'm just not to her yet, but yeah, she was the only one to apologize.
Right, that's what it was saying.
That's what you're going to say.
1706. You stole my line. You must be a witch. You're reading my mind.
Well, I'm having sex with demons right now, but...
that's it? Okay. Sorry, guys. That's what that noise is in the background.
With all my toads around me, It's a romantic scene, okay?
I hear the music of Basic Instinct.
I've got my 2-headed cat. You can hear Basic Instinct? Okay, got my ice pick. Good. So the girls...
Did they ever confess that they made all this shit up?
Mm-mm.
No?
Actually, I want to say it was January 16th. It was 1693.
Okay.
1694, which is my birthday, by the way.
Oh, you were born in 1694?
Yes. You didn't know. I'm really old.
That's right.
Really old.
Oh, that witch boy.
I'm a vampire, but now you know I'm a witch. It was all that demon sex I had. So they had like a day of remembrance. Now, they didn't exactly exonerate these people.
Okay.
But it was basically the town coming out and saying, hey, we might have messed up.
Yeah. I might need to retract some of this, guys.
Well, this is why people like Sarah Cloyce was like, okay, well, if you can admit that you messed up and that you might have lied and sent innocent people to their deaths, then I want to sue all of you.
Okay.
And she did. That's what Three Sovereigns for Sarah is about, is she wanted to sue everybody for her wrongful imprisonment, her wrongful arrest, her sisters her sisters were both killed. And they weren't alone in that. There were other people, like I said, there were people who were mad that their family members were gone or were in prison for so long, or you yourself was thrown in prison and you're like, man, I was in prison for like 8 months, you assholes.
Yeah.
They want, what's the word I'm looking for?
Reparations?
Yeah, they want something like that. They want to be compensated or they might want their land back or something, their house back or whatever.
Let alone their dignity.
Or their dignity. Again, is this accusation going to follow me everywhere? Well, the attitudes about that really changed after Salem, because before that lady down the street, she was accused of witchcraft, but she might be the only lady you know of that was accused of witchcraft. But after Salem, there's that's right. Everybody. Man, I was accused of witchcraft during all that. Holy shit, I was too.
Hey, you too? We should have a book club.
You're right. We've got something in common, what they accuse you of. Oh, I was sending, two-headed dogs over to their house and licking their buttholes,
Sometimes you got to pay extra for that.
The witch trials had a profound effect on the history of America because it completely changed the way we do our system. And bear with me, because I am not talking about today's standards.
Whoa.
Well, because every time I say this, someone will go, it's not like that. And I'm like, okay, we're not talking about 2022 either.
As we have very high standards at this date.
It's kind of backwards over in England because, and this came over with the Puritans. If you go on trial there, it's not that your accuser has to prove that you did it, which is the case here.
Okay.
You would have to prove that you didn't.
Right.
You'd have to prove your innocence.
It's not innocent until proven
guilty. It's not innocent until proven guilty. But guess what? Created that mindset? It was these witch trials. No longer can you use spectral evidence. You can't have if you cannot prove it in a court of law, then if it doesn't fit, you have to acquit. Okay, Tim?
That's right.
And your accuser will have to prove that you did this. You won't necessarily, have to, you're probably going to want to try and prove you were innocent, but you don't necessarily have to do anything. Your accuser has to prove that you did it. And it was these trials that changed all that. And that, people think, that the trials are, and they are famous because of the hysteria and be accusing all of these people of witchcraft, and it encompassed the whole town. It's famous mainly, I think, because its effect on our legal system and how we do things. It could have easily been our legal system could have would have developed a completely different way had these trials not happened in the manner in which they did.
Yeah, exactly.
But you are right. I believe it was 1706 when Ann Putnam Jr. finally gave a public apology. She was the only one to do so. She did not admit, though, that she lied. She didn't come out and say, I lied. She just said,
hey, I'm sorry this happened, but it happened. Right?
She did say, she blamed it on the devil. She said that the devil had,
we've heard this
the devil
before.
made her do it. We've heard this before. She was using the devil made me do it before Butch DeFeo thought it was cool. So, she was way ahead of Butch DeFeo. But she went with the devil made me do it. Yeah, she did not actually. John Hale was another one. Now, John Hale didn't accuse anybody. He didn't sentence anybody to die or anything like that, but he was definitely there and was in the middle of it. And he wrote in his diary, he was like,
Dear diary, I saw another witch today.
If you ever find yourself in a crashing plane, just break out into group sex. I mean, come on, you squares. But I loved Deep Thoughts with Jack Handy. I'm that old.
The best skit ever.
If you ever lose your keys in a rock of molten lava, just let it go. Because, man, they're gone.
Of the many books that you have on the Salem Witch Trials, Jack Handy's books, like right there.
I thought they were so funny. I loved Jack Handy. But he wrote in his diary, that so dark, was the lamentations of their afflictions and of that time that they were lost and they couldn't see and we couldn't see our way.
Okay.
And basically what Hale was saying is, yes, we sent innocent people to the news. We sent innocent people to their deaths. I was not directly responsible for that, but I was there. Mm-hmm. I didn't do anything to stop it. I didn't do anything to help these people, is what he was saying. So, yes and no.
Okay.
To whether or not the girls.
Okay, I forgot what the question was, but yes or no, audience.
Did the Puritans know in their lifetime, in that time, that they were doing something wrong? Yes. Had they recognized it? Yes. Rather they all admitted to it or not is a different story. But Hale and Putnam Jr. and others, their testimonies, their apologies, such as they were, even if Ann Putnam tried to blame on something else, it's still them saying, we did wrong. Okay. Ann Putnam Jr., as loud as she was, as crazy as the things were that she said, she did come out and say, what I did was wrong. Now, it was the devil that made me do it, but it was wrong. It was wrong. I shouldn't have done it.
One of the historians that I was on one of these documentaries, it keeps coming up and again, his name was Tad Baker. Mm-hmm. And he stated that after the trials came to a halt, that there was kind of a government cover-up, that even in any publications they were outlawed from bringing up the witch trials. So it was like they were trying to, just shut this down. Let's not speak of it.
Oh, anymore. It was hugely embarrassing to them, no doubt. Whether or not there was some kind of conspiracy there, I don't know. But I can tell you that Increase Mather, he was the president of Harvard University at the time that these trials were going on. Now, when he finally got old and retired or died or whatever, Cotton Mather, his son, of course, was like, cool. I mean, obviously I'm the most ideal person for this job. And the university was like, no, not you. And he was like, I don't understand. Cotton Mather was real hopping mad about this. Kind of just assumed all of his life that, that was going to be his job, and the university, because of now granted, he didn't serve on the court of Orior and Terminer, and he did warn against the use of spectral evidence in court cases. That being said, he still, because of his connection to the Salem Witch Trials, he believed that those people who were accused were witches. He badmouthed them. He spoke, badly about them. He supported their convictions and their executions. He may have actually been present for a couple of them, although he claimed that he wasn't. And it was because of this that Harvard wanted to separate themselves from all of that entirely. Yeah. They just did not want that image. Because of that, they wouldn't give that job to Cotton Mather. Now, I'm going to say this lightly because I don't actually know.
Krista's got some dirt.
I know, but...
Let's hear it.
Yale University.
Oh. Did he go to work at Yale?
Supposedly, he was like, fine, if you won't give me Harvard, I'm going to go...
I'm
starting my own...
Did Yale take him?
I don't know the history of Yale to be able to tell you. Here it says, Yale traces its beginnings to an act for liberty to erect a collegiate school, a would-be charter passed during a meeting in New Haven by the General Court of the Colony of Connecticut on October 9th, 1701. The act was an effort to create an institution to train ministers and lay leadership for Connecticut. Soon after, a group of 10, Samuel Andrew Thomas, Samuel Mather, a nephew of Increase Mather, James Noyes, son of Reverend Noyes, and so on and so forth, all alumni of Harvard, but it doesn't list Cotton Mather.
Okay, just curious. Maybe he was like, oh, well, fuck this. I'm going to go to Brown. I'm going to Duke.
Well, here it says, meanwhile, there was a rift forming at Harvard between its sixth president, Increase Mather, and the rest of the Harvard clergy, whom Mather viewed as increasingly liberal, ecclesiastically lax, and overly broad in church policy. The feud caused the Mathers to champion the successes of the collegiate school in the hope that it would maintain the Puritan religious orthodoxy in a way that Harvard had not.
Okay.
So I can tell you that Harvard did not give the presidency, the job to Cotton Mather because of his affiliation with the Salem Witch trials.
All right, then. How did they dispose of the bodies after the hangings? Was there like a mass grave? Did they just kind of dump them off the side of the hill or what?
So they did bury them in a mass grave. So if you were accused, now this was true in England too, if you were accused of heresy, it didn't necessarily have to be witchcraft, but most especially witchcraft. If you were accused of heresy, witchcraft, something like that, you could not be buried on consecrated land. Even if they burned you at the stake and, cleaned your soul and all of that, like we talked about.
Which we already talked about, but that did not happen.
That they didn't burn anybody in New England. But your land would be forfeit and sold at auction, and you could not be buried on any consecrated, there we go, holy land of any kind.
Okay, so what happened?
They'd bury you in a mass grave. Now, in the case of the Salem Witch trials, they didn't know where the gallows were exactly, but I would wager by art or testimony left behind that they were taken kind of into the woods, out of view. And then they would be cut down and there'd be a grave, a real shallow grave.
Right.
Either dug for them or there'd be a mass pit of them. There were 5 of them on July when Rebecca Nurse was hung. It was her and 4 other women, including Sarah Good. Mm-hmm. That was when she did the "God will give you blood to drink."
Yes.
So after they were hung, they were cut down and they were each buried in a shallow grave, right there. And it was after it got dark that Rebecca Nurse's, I believe her sons, they got into a boat. So they had to have been near the water, because her sons were able to reach the spot by boat and stay out of sight under the cover of darkness. And they dug her body up and took it back to her homestead and buried her on her land.
Okay.
They have all been exonerated since then.
When did that happen?
I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look that up, but I just know that they've been exonerated. Okay. It says, after his tenure as president, Increase Mather and his son were instrumental in founding the college, which has since become Yale. It was Cotton Mather who suggested the name Yale. So yeah, Cotton Mather was a part of founding Yale. I had a professor, Dr. Cooper, actually, in college. He was telling us this story, about how Harvard wouldn't give that job to Cotton Mather. And he was like, fine,
Look over here to these guys.
Another prestigious university.
I hear they're hiring.
They are hiring.
That's right.
And that is the story of the Salem Witch trials.
And that is a horrible, horrible time in early North American history.
And it had a profound effect on Puritans as well, because they kind of became unpopular, not just with, the rest of the colonies, but with themselves, with each other as well.
The aftermath of this kind of have a huge separation within the colony?
People will ask, what happened to the Puritans? They didn't just disappear,
No, it's not Roanoke.
They didn't just disappear. They were not the lost colony of Roanoke.
Croatoan.
So what else? What happened to them? I mean, they didn't just disappear. So after these witch trials, what happened to them? Well, they continued life as normal. I mean, as normal as could possibly be after that. They just continued. They moved on. There wasn't any other choice. But, things kind of got slow. This utopian, this Christian city on a hill that everybody, was going to want to adopt is not working out.
No.
And the Salem witch trials were all of the nails in the coffin. It was every single one of them was those trials. Okay.
Right.
They are not popular.
No, I would think so.
And you've got less and less people showing up. to church, the rules are getting real lax, and these sermons are boring as hell. People are falling asleep.
Ain't nothing exciting anymore. Man, remember that time when we used to go and watch the hangings?
I mean, my God, they're not allowed to have any fun. I mean, hell, Bridget Bishop plays shuffleboard for crying out loud, and this got her in trouble. Those who are showing up for church, they're falling asleep, They're not paying any attention. But hey, I'm here. I'm there.
Yep.
So eventually what happens is later on, there was an event in history, in American history, called the Great Awakening.
Ooh. That was when church was over and everybody had to get up and walk out?
This was a movement that started in these, Puritan and Quaker communities. And it started with men like a guy named George Whitefield. Jonathan Edwards was another. And they had a different style of preaching. Have you ever been to a Baptist or a Methodist church? Have you ever seen the preachers that talk real loud and they thump on the Bible? You ever seen that?
Oh, yeah.
This was their style. And the reason they would do this is we're talking really slow, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden we raise our voice and everybody wakes up. Everybody in the congregation's like, oh, shit, what's going on?
Oh, yeah.
And they were doing this on purpose to wake people up, to freak them out in the middle of the service. And it was just a style that stuck. But it wasn't necessarily bringing people back into the church either. They needed to figure out a way to bring people back in. And they did that by preaching about really scary things. This is where the hellfire and brimstone sermons started coming real popular. And now you have Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, and so on. So what happened to the Puritans? The Puritans didn't disappear. They didn't go back to England. They transformed into other things that exist today.
Like the American government?
It's interesting talking to my peers about this because the Puritans were crazy, and it's like, how were you raised? What church did you go to? Oh, I went to a Baptist church. And I'm like, what do you think what do you think you used to be? This is what we originated from. And so they just transformed into other things.
Very interesting.
But we did get a little more lax. I mean, we did ultimately decide it is okay to have a drink and play shuffleboard.
Okay, it's good. In my preparation for this series, I did watch like the History Channel specials, America's Hidden Stories called Salem Secrets. There was also History's Mysteries, which covered the Salem Witch Trials. That episode aired in 2002. And I also watched In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy back on December 13th of 1980.
My favorite documentary over Salem is the one that the History Channel did. In Search of History. And Leonard Nimoy isn't the narrator, but it did air like way back in the 90s, like I'd have been a kid. But that's my favorite. That's my favorite one. Has spooky music and everything.
Not the song from Basic Instinct?
Basic Instinct.
In this Salem Witch Trials, though, the one big, long mini-series that I watched with Kirstie Alley played Ann Putnam. And she did a really good job in this. And in her story, she was having miscarriages, and she was also questioning, why would God, curse me and not
she played
let
the
me have
mom?
any more children.
Ann Putnam Jr. Yeah, so Ann Putnam Jr. and her mom were both. The mom did suffer a series of miscarriages, and of course, when her daughter started being, quotations afflicted, that it had been witchcraft that had, caused her miscarriages and stuff like that. Because remember, we talked about this in the last episode, witches love to become midwives so they can torment the brand new, the born,
right.
And so that's what she claims she thought. But I still think that there's some truth to the Putnam family coaching. They did manage to make some enemies in town. They weren't everybody's favorite people, but they had money. They had land.
And this Kirstie Alley playing Ann Putnam, she was sympathetic because in this movie, she wanted to speak out and to say that this is wrong. She did not trust her daughter, Annie Putnam, the junior, and the girl who played Annie Putnam in the movie. She was so believable. She was a good actress. I really hated her, so she did a really good job. But Kirstie Alley was sentimental and wanted to come out and say something, especially to save Tituba. But at the same time, I think we talked about this, that it was not in your best interest to speak up for those that were accused.
No, because it's like signing that petition for Rebecca Nurse. You sign it, but you do so at great risk, because the moment you do that, these girls or someone else could very easily point the finger at you.
That's
and if
right.
spectral evidence is allowed in a court case, how do you prove that you aren't sending your specter over there to torment these girls? You can't. You can't prove that. It's a choosing a side, and they chose to believe the girls because there were so many of them where they're, and you can't help but find it interesting that it's not until the governor's wife, the Increase Mather's wife, or John Hale's wife gets accused that they finally put a stop to these things,
Yeah. In the movie, it had like Samuel Paris was like the one who sent the letter accusing the governor's wife or whatever. And then they were like, wait a minute. In the movie, I think they portrayed it as, how could you accuse this woman you have never met of witchcraft? And his line was something like, it sounded just as reasonable as the accusations against these other people.
There might be some truth to this as well. There's some people that argue once you start lying, you got to tell another lie to cover up that one, another one to cover up that one. I don't think that that's necessarily what was going on here. I think they just told lie after lie after lie after lie. But yes, I do think that there is some truth to once they got going. I don't think it was a matter of couldn't stop. I think they wouldn't stop.
Yeah, kind of like Pringles.
These girls were famous. We mentioned this earlier. They were giving attention paid to them that never would have been paid to them before.
Yeah.
And they are rock star famous. Like,
and all I gotta do is like throw a fit and jiggle around and
there were
scream.
two ways to look at Salem during the trials, if you lived outside of Salem. For some people, it was, yeah, I don't want anything to fucking do with that. Okay. Screw everything about this. I'm going to disappear. I'm taking my wife and my kids and we're getting out. Or you're super interested in it and you go to Salem because you want to see the show that these girls put on.
Yeah, exactly. They were probably selling beverages. It was big business probably, right?
I mean, there were people who flocked to Salem just to see these girls.
It was the best playhouse in town. Catherine Howe, she's a historian. She also called the girls their fits. It was called conversion disorder, which is emotional stress through physical symptoms. These girls were physically having symptoms that were just being acted out. But I think you're right. Once they started getting attention, maybe they started escalating it. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And yes, by the end of it, they're rock stars for Satan.
Yeah, rock star favorite. But what I don't know is, were they made to see the consequences of their words?
They needed to.
I mean, Mike and I were out playing disc golf one day, and we were talking about this.
And he said, not again.
He was like, did those girls witness the executions? I don't think that they were made to watch them, but I'm with you. I think they should have. I think if they could physically see the consequences of their accusations, then, there might have been a difference. They knew that they were getting hung. I mean, they knew that. They knew these people were going to die. Yes. Would it have made a difference if they had saw it or not? I don't know, but I kind of think it would. It's one thing to, like us sitting here talking about it, but if we were to be able to go back in time and physically see this, I think that you and I both would be like, what the actual fuck?
Yeah.
I know the story frontwards and backwards, but yet it would be so different to see it.
Yes.
I mean, you'd want to slap all those girls. And if you see somebody getting hung, I would like to think that, these girls would be like, maybe we don't want to tell people that they send two-headed dogs over to my house or whatever.
That's right.
But they still knew the consequences. They knew what were going to happen to these people. Mm-hmm. And even after Bridget Bishop or Rebecca Nurse and Sarah Good and all the rest of them, they didn't stop. They continued.
Wow.
They would have continued until somebody put a stop to it, which is what happened. They would have kept doing it. They would have kept going. And that's one of the things that I just have a hard time personally getting over. There didn't seem to be any end to their finger pointing. They just kept accusing.
And continued to be believed.
Yes.
By their elders.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and part of that is because you've got people who are accused going, yep, I did it. Uh-huh. Yep. You know, it's not until after these trials are over and they realize everything that was wrong with what was going on with the court of Oyer and Terminer. Well, of course, they're going to confess if that's the only way out. Mm-hmm. And that was I read something like 39 people or something took that road out, including Tituba.
Wow.
So you've got 39 of these accused going, yep, no, totally. These girls are telling the truth. Yep, I did all that shit.
Wow. God.
If you're a Puritan and forget everything you know about the future, forget everything you know today, and you live there, you'd like to think that you'd be one of those that would see it for what it is, a farce, and would speak out and say, you know what, I think these girls are full of shit. But you probably wouldn't. A, you probably wouldn't know any better.
Right.
And B, probably be too afraid. And that was the terrible position that all of these people were put in.
They were probably all afraid to say anything, too, because the finger was going to get pointed at them if they did.
And all sorts of things throughout history. Oh, man, if I were there, this is what I would do. Well, we don't really know.
Right.
You just don't really know what you would do. You would like to think that you would do the right thing. But I do know that I would definitely want to slap all those girls. Like, for real. Not send my specter. I would want to physically do it.
No.
What bothers me is that there doesn't seem to be any punishment whatsoever.
After all this is said and done, the girls just went on their merry way and lived their lives.
Yes.
Fuck them girls.
Ann Putnam, I believe her parents died and she ended up getting stuck taking care of.
I think I read
all of her
9 children or something like that. And that made me laugh.
Yeah, people had huge families. She died at a relatively young age, not for her time period, but for ours, certainly. Yeah. Those girls, they lived their lives and dealt with it in their own way. How they dealt with it, I don't know, internally, how they made their peace with it.
Yeah.
That's a mystery for the ages. I don't know.
I couldn't live with myself.
But I know that I would not be able to live with myself, yeah. The Crucible actually touches on this a little bit, and I don't know if this is actually true, if this really happened, but one of the girls worked in the Proctor household, and Elizabeth Proctor is trying to get her to admit that, these accusations are false. And it kind of looked like she might do that. So the other girls kind of ganged up on her. And the fear there was that she herself would be the next, because the older girls were not safe from not being accused of witchcraft. You know what I'm saying? So they had to keep themselves as the victims rather than a perpetrator. Now, whether or not, this riff with the girls actually happened or not, I don't know. Given their attitudes towards everyone else, it really wouldn't surprise me one bit. Yes, I believe absolutely that all the girls would gang up on the one that wanted to dissent. You're going to be next. You absolutely will be next. So if you're one of the girls and you want to tell the truth, you're not going to.
No. That is a fucked up part of early history.
Mm-hmm. Now, I did read a story. I can't remember where, but it was like 2000, 2001, and there was a teacher somewhere in the U.S. that accused a student of witchcraft.
Oh.
Of course, this did not go to court. There was no credence given to this, but she claimed that she had a student that was a witch and was trying to harm her with witchcraft.
Okay.
And there may have been a student really trying to do this, but do I think this student, actually hurt her? No, I don't. I can tell you no one was sent to the news over that one. The Age of Enlightenment did finally hit.
Okay. When?
The Age of Enlightenment occurred towards the latter half of the 1700s. And this is when we started to figure out that witches and werewolves and ghosts and shit like that. I would list vampires except There actually was a vampire scare after the Age of Enlightenment had occurred. And to me, I just found that really absurd. Like, you would think it would be the other way around, but...
Is that another episode?
As far as I know, there weren't any, like trials, but there was Marie Theresa of Austria. She's Marie Antoinette's mom.
Okay.
She had been hearing these stories, and she didn't know if they were true or not. So she sent a dude throughout Europe to see if there was any credence to any of these vampire stories, and of course he came back with nothing. But the Age of Enlightenment did occur, and we did discover that ghosts and witches and things like that, aren't real, and we stopped prosecuting people for those things.
I still believe.
We did finally stop doing that.
Well, that's good.
I don't think that, this is complimentary or like we still messed up in plenty of other areas, but, at least we did stop witch hunts.
At least we did.
We went after people because they were gay, but we...
Other witch hunts.
We did have witch hunts. They just were of a different kind.
Right.
Just ask Joseph McCarthy about it. That was a communist scare joke, but...
For all of you history nerds out there that just went, oh, man.
It was. It was a witch hunt.
It was a witch hunt.
Just didn't call it that. So there's been witch hunts since then, but they've just not literally looking for witches. Just,
okay.
For example, there is a documentary out there called Witch Hunt.
Ooh.
And it's not about witches.
Okay.
It is about a series of court cases in the 1980s in California where these children were accusing all of these adults of sexual abuse. And all of these adults were being convicted. They were being thrown in prison. They served lengthy prison sentence only to find out that the accusations weren't true.
Oh.
One guy spent 20 years in prison.
Might check that out, too. Interesting.
Like I said, we thought Ann Putnam might be coached. Yeah, some of these kids were being coached.
Yeah.
What did the Salem Witch trials do? It created an opportunity to get rid of your imagined or real enemies.
Yep.
We don't send people to prison for witchcraft, but sexual abuse, fuck yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And if you can get somebody convicted on that, you can send somebody away for a long time.
That's right.
And that's why they called it witch hunt, because these accusations weren't true.
Well, guys, that was the Salem Witch Trials. A lengthy series we just did on this. I had a lot of information in here that I did not think we would have so much to talk about. We finally got through it, though.
It went longer than I actually thought it would.
You've done great work. Thank you, Krista, for bringing this story to the moratorium. This is great stuff, and I can't wait to see what you bring us next time. But we had a little discussion before the show that our next episode is going to be a Christmas episode. So we're going to do a little one-off episode and talk about different crimes or such that happened around a certain holiday.
Oh, maybe it wasn't the fat man who came down the chimney.
Oh.
You remember that awful story that chick tells in
Gremlins? Because that's exactly
Gremlins?
what I went to.
Yes!
I saw Phoebe Cates in the back of my mind.
Phoebe
I'm like,
Cates was totally thinking about that story that she tells in Gremlins about her dad. And I'm like, oh.
And we can talk about how Gremlins is a horror movie.
Hey, the mom is the most badass. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
In that movie.
That's right.
The mom.
She took on 3 or 4 of them, right? Yeah.
She
in the microwave.
She killed several in the kitchen, and then she's double fisting the kitchen knives and takes on the one in the tree.
Puts the one in the blender. Yeah.
She gets one in the microwave and one in the blender. Oh, yeah.
Sweet. All right, guys. Well, we're going to wrap up this episode. Hey, go on over to our social media and check us out, guys. Please. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm still putting up TikTok videos. I'll have one put out for the witches again this week. Please go check it out. Hey guys, go on over to our website and you can find links to everything you need at themoratorium.com. Please go out there, tell a friend, like, share, and subscribe. We are up on YouTube as well. I put up an audio version there. Please subscribe to that. We are getting really close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. All we lack is about 960 more subscribers and we'll hit that. So please go on over there and subscribe. Help us out. Tell a friend. Tell a family member. Force a family member to listen to this episode. Hey, we can use all the help we can get. Go on over to our Patreon and help us support this podcast. You can give any dollar amount, but even $1 a month can help support us, and we will continue to bring you this quality entertainment and history lessons as long as you're listening. All right, guys, what do you think, Krista? Let's shut this bitch down.
No, it's witch.
Let's shut this witch down. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
You've been listening to a special edition of The Moratorium, an MT Cornfield production. Tune in next week where Krista and I delve into holiday horrors, a plethora of homicides that just happen to be around the jolly season. If you have any movie suggestions, or just want to tell us how much we really suck, you can contact us at moviemoratorium@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and long live VHS.